Have you ever wondered how one of the most enduring conflicts in modern history began? The Israel-Palestine conflict didn't just happen overnight. Our story begins in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time of great upheaval and change. It was during this era that the seeds of what would become the Israel-Palestine conflict were sown. This was a time when national movements were on the rise, and two in particular would play a significant role in this narrative: Zionism and Arab nationalism. Zionism, a movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the territory defined as the historic land of Israel, was gaining momentum. Theodor Herzl, often considered the father of modern political Zionism, argued that the Jewish people should return to their ancestral home, a sentiment echoed by many Jews across the globe. Parallel to this, Arab nationalism was also taking shape. It was a movement aimed at the unification of the Arab peoples and countries, and the end of colonial rule. The Arab people, who had been living in the region for centuries, began to express their aspirations for self-determination and independence. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 proved to be a turning point. Issued by the British government, it stated support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was then under British control. This declaration was seen by the Zionists as a massive step forward. But it sparked outrage among the Arab population, who felt their rights and claims to the land were being ignored. In the years following, the British mandate in Palestine allowed for increased Jewish immigration to the region. This led to a significant demographic shift, and tensions between the Jewish and Arab communities escalated. By the time World War II ended, the stage was set for a conflict that would define the Middle East for the next century. The roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict were firmly planted, and the subsequent events would only serve to deepen the divide. The year is 1948 and the world map is about to change drastically. In the aftermath of World War II, the United Nations drew up a plan to partition Palestine, a region under British control. This plan aimed to establish two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem under international administration. The Jewish community, represented by the Jewish Agency, accepted this plan, seeing it as a stepping stone towards a sovereign Jewish state. However, the Arab League and Palestinian Arab leadership vehemently opposed the partition plan. They viewed it as an infringement on the rights of the majority Arab population in Palestine. Despite the opposition, the UN General Assembly passed the resolution, and on May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. The establishment of Israel was a moment of joy for the Jewish people, who had long yearned for a homeland. Yet the creation of Israel was not met with universal applause. Its birth resulted in an immediate military reaction from neighboring Arab states. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and others marched into the newly declared state, marking the start of the First Arab-Israeli War. This war, also known as the War of Independence in Israel, was a fierce and bloody conflict, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Despite being heavily outnumbered and outgunned, the Israeli forces managed to hold their ground and even expand their control beyond the borders outlined in the UN partition plan. After a year of intermittent fighting, a series of armistice agreements in 1949 brought about a temporary halt to the hostilities. Israel survived its birth pangs and established itself as a new state on the world stage. However, the Arab states refused to recognize Israel, and the Palestinian Arabs found themselves stateless, leading to a refugee crisis that continues to this day. The ceasefire of 1949 didn't bring peace, but it did establish a new status quo. The stage was set for a conflict that would shape the Middle East for decades to come. This was just the beginning of the turbulent history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Fast forward to 1967, a year that would again drastically alter the landscape. We arrive at a pivotal point in history, the Six-Day War. This conflict was initiated by Israel against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The war was swift and intense, and by the end of it, Israel had tripled its size. In the aftermath of this war, Israel found itself in control of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. These territories were previously under the jurisdiction of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, respectively. This shift in control marked a significant change in the dynamics of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The acquisition of these territories by Israel was met with resistance and resentment from the Palestinians living there, leading to an escalation in tensions. This period also saw the birth of the Israeli settlement movement, with Israeli citizens moving into these newly occupied territories, further inflaming the conflict. These events set the stage for an expansion of the conflict, moving beyond the borders of Israel and Palestine and involving other nations in the Middle East. The Six-Day War had not just reshaped the map of the region, but it had also reshaped the nature of the conflict. The war lasted only 6 days, but its effects are still felt today. From the late 20th century to the present day, the conflict has been marked by cycles of violence, peace talks, and stalemates. The Oslo Accords in the early 90s, for instance, created a sense of optimism. Both parties recognized each other's right to exist, paving the way for potential resolution. Yet this fleeting hope was shattered by the Second Intifada at the turn of the millennium. A period of intensified Palestinian-Israeli violence, the uprising resulted in significant loss, fostering deep-seated resentment and mistrust between the two groups. In more recent years, clashes have continued, fueled by ongoing issues. The expansion of Israeli settlements in disputed territories remains a contentious point, viewed by Palestinians as an encroachment on their lands. The status of Jerusalem, a city sacred to both Jews and Muslims, is another hotly debated issue. Israel's declaration of the entire city as its capital has been met with international criticism and Palestinian opposition. The question of a two-state solution, where Israel and Palestine would coexist as separate nations, is still on the table. However, achieving this remains elusive due to the myriad of obstacles, including disagreements over borders, security, water rights, and the return of Palestinian refugees. Today, the Israel-Palestine conflict remains one of the world's most complex and controversial issues. So, what have we learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict? We've journeyed from its genesis, navigating the creation of Israel and the First Arab-Israeli War. We've explored the Six-Day War and the ripple effects it left behind. We've arrived at the present day, grappling with ongoing challenges. This conflict, steeped in history and fraught with complexities, continues to evolve. As we continue to witness the unfolding of this historic conflict, one can only hope for a future where peace prevails.